Do you find yourself sitting in front of the computer screen, trying to wrangle words so they make sense, so they're persuasive, so they mean something? If so, you could be suffering from the worst type of blogger's block. But it is curable. Keep listening and I'll share the cure in this week's episode of the Blogcentric podcast. Welcome to Spiderworking's Blogcentric podcast, a podcast about blogging. Hello and welcome to episode 50 of the Blogcentric podcast. I'm Amanda Webb, and you'll find the show notes for today's episode with a pretty full transcription and all the resources I mention at spiderworking.com/50. spiderworking.com/50. I suffer from blogger's block a lot. I used to joke that I suffered for 11 months out of 12, but it's not nearly as bad anymore. However, there are still times when I'm tangled in words that refuse to make sense. And I still blog when I'm like this. It just takes much longer. I know I'm not alone. Blogger's block can be crippling. I've identified 3 types of blogger's block. 1 is lack of ideas. 2 is feeling like you're wasting your time with blogging. 3, and this is the worst, not being able to make your words make sense. And I've dealt with 1 or 2 in previous episodes of the podcast, but the hardest one to beat is that 3rd one. So what's the cure? Those of you who subscribe to my newsletter or who are regular readers will know all about my book club. Each month I pick a business read and recommend we all read it together. And in September, that read was How to Find Your Writing Voice by Chris Brogan. And the bit that really impressed me in that book was the section on writing frames. I felt a bit of an idiot for not knowing about them or implementing them before, but as I read his book, I knew this could be the answer to the word wrangling. They're not just good for blogger's block either. They're good for blogging in general. And I'm going to talk you through writing frames today and tell you how to implement them. You're listening to Blogcentric from Spiderworking. Content or writing frames are structures for your writing. In the book, Chris Brogan describes content frames as a way to think about organising your words and ideas so that you can spend more time writing and spend less time worrying about how to put something together. Essentially, they're templates for your blog posts. Doesn't sound much like a new idea, does it? And I'm sure lots of us spend time outlining our posts before we write. But a writing frame goes beyond a few bullet points, a few lines of text. It's a template that you can apply to all your blog posts that will make writing them easier. For example, let's look at Social Media Examiner. Just take a look at any post on your site and you'll find that they have a consistent format. They've had hundreds of contributors over the years, yet every post looks like it fits on the site. There's an introduction that starts with a question, and this is followed by the key sharing image. The next paragraph describes what you're going to learn in the post. The following paragraphs outline each idea or point in detail. There's a call to action image, and then the final paragraph that asks for input from readers. Below all that is an image for sharing on Pinterest. There are posts that break that format, but even these have their own frames. The weekly social media news posts have a consistent format, as do the podcasts. There's comfort in landing on a Social Media Examiner post. Having consistency enhances their brand and it makes us readers familiar with the site really quickly. That's a hard job when you've got so many contributors. So frames can reaffirm your brand and breed familiarity. But how else can they help? What about that blogger's block I was talking about? Well, having a frame helps you focus. When you know what the purpose of each section of your post is, it's much easier to write a post. Instead of staring at a blank page, we're looking at a form. We just need to fill in the blanks. Structure helps knock our minds back into shape and gets us thinking straight again. I'm suffering from blogger's block right now, and having a frame is helping me combat it. It works! But content frames are also good when we're not suffering, when the words flow freely. You might think at times like this, structures and procedures are going to curb your creativity, but instead, they stop us going off on those mad tangents we tend to when the words flow. And they make sure that our beautiful words still tell the story that we wanted them to. They also help us write faster. Have I persuaded you? Good. The next question is, how do we create a content frame? You can create one single writing frame that's going to work for all your blog posts, or you can do what I recommend, which is have a different frame for each type of post you write. For example, you might have a review post frame, a tutorial post frame, an opinion post frame, a vlog frame, a podcast frame, a news story frame, a roundup post frame, and of course the list can go on. Write a list of all the types of blog content you produce and aim to create a frame for each. Now you've got that, it's on to creating the frame. Step 1, the big question. Start with one question. It's not always going to be an easy one to answer, but once you've decided on what that answer is, it's going to make your writing much easier. And that question you need to ask is, what do you want readers to get from the post? This could be an opinion you want to persuade them of, an emotion that you want them to feel at the end of the story. An example would be my answer for the question for this episode of the show is use content frames because they'll save you time, make your blog consistent and cure bloggers' block. You can tell me in the comments on the show notes if I've achieved that goal, if that's what you got from this post, from this podcast. Step 2, how will you open each post? I described how Social Media Examiner opens each post with a question. What format do you want your opening lines to take? So it could be a question like Social Media Examiner. Maybe it's going to be a story, a statement, a quote. Maybe you'll follow this with an introduction to your topic. Step 3, you want to look at how you're going to end each post. Will you summarise the main points? Will you draw conclusions? Will you ask for comments? Will you add a call to action? If you're following me along, you now have 3 elements for your content frame. 1, the answer to that big question. Number 2, the opening paragraph structure. And number 3, the final paragraph structure. On to step 4. Outline what you're going to cover in each paragraph. So you have a beginning, you have an end, now you've got to fill in the middle. Think about how each paragraph should move the post forward and persuade your audience of their key point. I'm putting together a structure for my review posts at the moment. It's a work in progress, but I'm going to share it with you now as an example. Start with the blog title, the header image, the opening. In that opening, I ask the question that the review post will answer. Paragraph 1 is a brief outline of the book, the product, the app, the service that I'm reviewing. Then I have a subheading. Why read the book, try the app, or whatever it is I'm reviewing. Paragraph 2 is what I liked. Paragraph 3 is what I didn't like. Then I have another subheading, the verdict. And paragraph 4 is my verdict. Who should buy this book? Who should use it? Is it worth it? Then I have a subheading, your turn. Paragraph 5 is my closing. It's a call for comments. Then I have a call to action button. And then I have a Pinterest image. Step 5 is to test your frame. Now you've written your outline, test it, try it, put it into action. My first attempt at a review post frame didn't work out so well, so I've adapted it, and this one fits my style far better. You might need to do that with yours too.
You're listening to Blogcentric from Spiderworking.
I'm kind of ashamed that I've not used frames before. It's such a simple idea, and I'm sure Chris Brogan wasn't the one to come up with it. I'm sure people have been using these for years. There is a downside, of course, and that's finding the time to put these structures in place. Like any planning time you spend, you really won't regret it, because next time you get blogger's block, you'll be praising yourself for being so clever. Writing frames will save you time, they'll help you focus, and they'll help you create a consistent style on your blog. It's going to take that time now, but it's going to be well worth it. So you can guess what I want you to do for this week's blogging challenge, can't you? Well, number 1, I want you to write a list of the types of posts you write on your blog. So remember, that's kind of like review posts, opinion posts, etc. Number 2, pick one of those and create a writing frame. And number 3, test it. And don't forget to let me know how you get on. You can leave me a comment on the show notes, which are at spiderworking.com/50. And before you go and even leave that lovely comment, I'd like you to do something else for me. I would love it so much if you could go over to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to this podcast and leave me a review. Because when I get nice reviews, it always makes me want to keep podcasting. It makes me know that I'm spending my time wisely. I love getting them and I love reading them. It makes me happy. And you know what? If you make me happy, you might feel happy too. And you never know what good things will happen as a result. So go do that. Go try out writing frames. And until next week, happy blogging.
Blogcentric from Spiderworking is sponsored by We Teach Social, social media e-learning courses for small business. Find out more at weteachsocial.com.